an appropriate time for war, an appropriate time for peace. I see all those things. 14 comparisons Solomon makes. And just gave you a few thoughts there about them. And I thought, what can we learn from those? Well, the first thing I see is that God has made everything fit beautifully in its appropriate time. And God has given us eternity in our hearts. But one of the first main things I see is God knows all about our unfulfilled expectations. He knows all about our experience. God knows all about reality. God knows that we don't always get it right, saints. Our timing is off at times. We pluck when we should plant. We kill when we should be celebrating birth. We laugh when we should be weeping. We speak when we should be silent. But God knows the proper time. God knows when it's time for us to be born. God knows when it's time for us to die. God knows when we need to cry, and God knows when we need to laugh. That's the first thing I see. So God knows all of that. And a second thing I see is life in God creates a longing for something more within us. That's what he said. That's what Solomon says there in verse 11. God has also set eternity in the hearts of mankind, yet they cannot fathom. You see, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. So my treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. We have to keep eternity in perspective. C.S. Lewis once wrote, he said, our heavenly creators provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but God takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home. Because our home is somewhere else, saints. Third, I see there are some things in life you'll never know. Man, wouldn't we like to know everything? I'd like to know everything. I don't. It's interesting. This past week, one of my friends, on Facebook, he said, if you could talk to anybody, past or present, for just 1 hour more, who would it be? Well, all kinds of people respond. My mother, my father. I thought for about, and I finally wrote Jesus. My friend, he goes, why did I not know this? He used to put a big old LOL, laugh out loud. He goes, I knew you were going to say that. I said, and I not only wrote Jesus, I said, Jesus, because I have a lot of questions to ask. But yes, so there are some things we just don't know. But what's most important is God makes life beautiful in God's time. If we surrender our lives according to God's time and God's schedule, then ultimately it'll lead to a life of beauty. Something beautiful. That's what God can make of each and every one of us. In spite of what we think of ourselves, in spite of what we think of our situations, God can turn it around and make it beautiful for us. You know, the great use of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it. I came across this quote from the 1800s, and I thought it was very fitting. Something from the 1800s, you know. The guy, it was written by William Arthur Ward. He said, remember your possibilities, forget your limitations. Remember your potentialities, forget your seeming restrictions. Remember your abilities, forget your disabilities. Remember your assets, forget your liabilities. Remember your strengths, forget your weaknesses. Remember your joys, forget your sorrows. And I thought, how appropriate. There is a time for everything under the heavens. And yet I thought about it, and I said, but, you know, that's not always so easy. Yes, it's easy for us to say, yep, God's in control. It's easy that God's going to make something beautiful out of us. But there are times that we do get discouraged. We do get, downtrodden. And, and it's easy for us to say, well, why don't you just pray about it? Why don't you seek God? That's, pretty easy for us to say. And it's not so easy, though, is it? No. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I tend to overcomplicate my relationship with the Lord. I do. I want to pray, but I feel like I need to find exactly the right words or to pray about just the right thing. And in all that overthinking and overanalyzing, I lose sight of the fact that Jesus just wants me to talk to him. There's no right or wrong way to pray. On Facebook, this poem has been circulating or making the rounds pretty well. Some of you might have seen it, I don't know. But I thought it very appropriate for this passage of the scripture in Ecclesiastes. I don't know if it's true or not, but the message is good, and I share that with you this morning. It says, a minister passing through his church in the middle of the day decided to pause by the altar to see who'd come to pray. Just then the back door opened, and a man came down the aisle. The minister frowned as he saw the man hadn't shaved in a while. His shirt was torn and shabby, and his coat was worn and frayed. The man knelt down and bowed his head, then rose and walked away. In the days that followed at precisely noon, the preacher saw this chap. Each time he knelt just for a moment, a lunch pail in his lap. Well, the minister's suspicions grew, with robbery a main fear. He decided to stop and ask the man, "What are you doing here?" The old man said he was a factory worker, and lunch was half an hour. Lunchtime was his prayer time for finding strength and power. I stay only a moment because the factory's far away. As I kneel here talking to the Lord, this is kind of what I say. I just came by to tell you, Lord, how happy I have been since we found each other's friendship and you took away my sin. Don't know much of how to pray, but I think about you every day. So Jesus, this has been just checking in today. The minister, feeling foolish, told Ben that was fine. He told the man that he was welcome to pray there anytime. It's time to go, and thanks, Ben said, as he hurried to the door. Then the minister knelt there at the altar, which he had never done before. His cold heart melted, warmed with love as he met with Jesus there. As the tears flowed down his cheeks, he repeated Obed's prayer. I just came by to tell you, Lord, how happy I've been since we found each other's friendship and you took away my sin. I don't know much how to pray, but I think about you every day. So Jesus, this is me just checking in today. Past noon one day, the minister noticed that Obed hadn't come. As more days passed and still no Ben, he began to worry some. At the factory, he asked about him, learning he was ill. The hospital staff was worried, but he'd given them a thrill. The week that Ben was with them brought changes in the ward. His smiles and joy contagious. Changed people were his reward. The head nurse couldn't understand why Ben could be so glad. When no flowers, calls, or cards came, not a visitor he had. The minister stayed by his bed. He voiced the nurse's concern. No friends had come to show they cared. He had nowhere to turn. Looking surprised, old Ben spoke up and said with a winsome smile, the nurse is wrong. She couldn't know. He's been here all the while. Every day at noon he comes. A dear friend of mine, you see. He sits right down and takes my hand and leans ever and says to me, I just came by to tell you, Ben, how happy I have been since we found this friendship and I took away your sin. I think about you always and I love to hear you pray. And so, Ben, this is Jesus just checking in today. Wow. When we come to a relationship with Christ, we're not promised a life without challenges and obstacles. We still experience the ups and downs that everybody else experienced. In fact, Jesse has just experienced a down. But we know that God is with us and God is faithful and God promises that he will never leave us or forsake us. And we gained a true definition of a best friend in Jesus, saints. God is there for us every day. We don't have to pick up a phone or hop in the car. God will meet us wherever we are. And that's an awesome thing to remember. It's a good thing to remember. It's a beautiful thing for each and every one of us. Amen.